Good morning, friends. So today I'm sitting where we would be if you go to the 925 service. I thought that would be fun to be in this space together. And we're going to start with a story since we have a little more time on video. Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. Any of you read this story before? I won't read it entirely, but this is one of my favorite stories that Mark and I used to read together. So in this story, the grandpa is making pancakes at their house one morning for breakfast. And he flies a pancake, accidentally lands on the boy's head, and it was hilarious. And that night, it led him to tell a story. So in this story, there was a town called Chew and Swallow. And in this town, it was a normal town with a main street and shops and schools, except for one thing was different. There were no grocery stores because all of the food rained down. Every day when they woke up, they would have different food. They never knew what kind of food they would have that day. They couldn't place an order like you do at a restaurant. One day it might be raining hamburgers. Another day it might be raining chocolate chips, or it could be raining vegetable soup. Some days it rained hot dogs with mustard clouds. One day it rained baked potatoes and lamb chops. Wow. And the sanitation department would come by and they would clean up after the people had eaten all that they could for that day. Oh, one day it rained spaghetti. So I wonder, if you could have it rain down any kind of food that you would like, what would it be? For Miss Joy, it would be some kind of Thai food. Probably like a red or green curry dish with rice. Oh, I love that. So it continued to rain down, except one day in the town of Chew and Swallow, it got a little crazy. It just rained rolls, hard rolls, like soft and hard rolls, and they would bounce off the top of people's head and it hurt. And then one day it just rained, cream cheese and jelly sandwiches. They ate them, but it made them sick. Blah. And then one day it just rained salt and pepper. So the weather got crazy, just like our weather has gotten crazy in some parts of the country. And so it became not such a good thing. So you know what they did? They took their bread and they made it into a boat and they set sail for another town. And in this new town, they had to get used to the fact that they had to go to grocery stores because they had never had to go to grocery stores. And that was the end of Grandpa's amazing story about the town of Chew and Swallow. Well, what I think is fun about this story is that there is a real life place where it was almost like the town of Chew and Swallow in the Bible. In the Bible days, the Israelites, they were traveling in the book of Exodus. They were exiting Egypt. And the Israelites, who were God's people, were traveling from Egypt to the promised land, and they had to go through the desert. Now, there's not much food in the desert, right? And Moses was their leader, and Moses heard the people complaining, and they were like, we're going to die out here. We have no food. There were no grocery stores. There were no clouds raining hamburgers or hot dogs. But God did rain down something. Let me read it to you. And please read this story with your families. It's in the book of Exodus, chapter 16. The Lord spoke to Moses and said, I have heard the complaints of the Israelites. They were complaining because they were hungry, right? At twilight you shall eat meat, and in the morning you shall have your fill of bread. Then you shall know that I am the Lord your God. So in the evening, quail came up and covered the camp, and in the morning there was a layer of dew around the camp. And when the layer of dew lifted, there on the surface of the wilderness was a fine flaky substance, as fine as frost on the ground. When the Israelites saw it, they said, "What is it?" And they called it manna. Manna means, what is it? They didn't know what it was, but they knew who had provided it. And they had rules for the manna. The rules were not to be greedy, to not take and take and take more than you need. And God said, take what you need for one day at a time. In other words, don't worry about tomorrow and the next day and the next day. You take just what you need for today, and I'm going to take care of you. So today's story is a true story about God's people in the wilderness. And it reminds us of this funny story that's not true, which has a great imagination, about Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. And I just wonder if the author maybe knew about this true story in the Bible and then used their imagination to tell the rest of the story. So whenever it rains, imagine God raining down manna in the wilderness for the people when they didn't have what they needed. And the main message of this story today is to trust God, that God will give us what we need one day at a time. We're not to borrow it, because when they took more than they needed, guess what happened? It turned to maggots. So God says, take what you need one day at a time, and I'm going to be with you one day at a time, so we can trust that truth. And we can also have fun, imagining that our favorite food is raining down. So enjoy your day. I love you. And be sure to read that story in Exodus chapter 16 in the Old Testament.